The sun has set over the Mediterranean, and Alexandria sleeps. But we are awake, standing before the Great Library in the cool darkness of night. The moon casts long shadows across the limestone steps that lead to the entrance. These steps, worn smooth by centuries of scholars, philosophers, and scribes, gleam faintly in the starlight. We ascend slowly. Each footfall echoes softly against the stone. The air here smells different than the bustling harbor just a few streets away. Less salt, less fish, less humanity. Here, at the threshold of the world's greatest repository of knowledge, the air carries something else entirely. The bronze doors stand open, as they always do for the night scholars. They are massive, twice the height of a man, decorated with scenes of the muses. In daylight, they shine like captured sun. Now, they are dark sentinels framing the warm glow from within. We step inside. The first thing that strikes you is the smell. It's rich, almost alive. The scent of papyrus, thousands upon thousands of scrolls. Their reed fibers releasing a sweet, earthy aroma that mingles with beeswax from the writing tablets. There's something else too, subtle beneath it all. The mineral smell of ink, made from lamp soot and gum arabic, and the faint mustiness of vellum, that precious treated skin reserved for the most important works. The entrance hall stretches before us, its ceiling lost in shadows that the oil lamps cannot quite dispel. Our sandals whisper against the marble floor as we walk deeper into the library. The marble here is not the plain white stone of common buildings. It's veined with gold and amber, quarried from the distant hills and brought here at great expense. In the lamplight, these veins seem to move, to flow like rivers of honey frozen in stone. The lamps themselves hang from bronze chains, suspended at intervals along the walls. They burn olive oil, the good kind, pure and clean. The flames dance gently in the still air, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow. Some lamps are tended by the night attendants, silent figures in simple robes who move through the halls like ghosts, ensuring the flames never die, that darkness never claims this place. Listen. Beneath our own footsteps you can hear other sounds. The scratch of a stylus on wax from a side room where some insomniac scholar works through the night. The distant rustle of papyrus being carefully unrolled. Someone coughs, softly, trying not to disturb the silence. We turn left into the first great hall, the Hall of Greek Philosophy. The ceiling soars above us, supported by columns carved to resemble papyrus stalks, a tribute to the very material that holds all this knowledge. The columns are painted in colors that seem muted now in the lamplight but which blaze in daylight. Deep reds, brilliant blues, gold leaf that catches even this dim illumination. Along the walls, floor to ceiling, are the pigeonholes. Thousands of them. Each one contains scrolls, carefully rolled and tagged with small wooden labels that hang from linen cords. The tags bear titles written in precise Greek letters: Aristotle Physics, Books 1 to 4, Plato Republic, Complete, Heraclitus Fragments, Collected Edition. The air here is drier, deliberately so. The librarians understand, even if they cannot fully explain it, that dryness preserves the papyrus. Braziers of special charcoal burn in the corners, drawing moisture from the air. They add another scent to the atmosphere, a clean, sharp smell of controlled fire. We pass a reading table where a lone scholar sits, hunched over a scroll illuminated by a small bronze lamp at his elbow. He's young, perhaps 20, with the intense focus of someone who has traveled far to be here. His fingers trace the lines of text as he reads, his lips moving silently. He doesn't notice us. He is lost in the words of someone who died 300 years ago, lost in ideas that will outlive us all. The scroll before him is old. You can tell by the color of the papyrus, which has deepened from cream to a rich brown, like honey left to darken in the sun. The ink has faded to a softer black, but the words are still clear, still readable, still powerful. We move on, leaving him to his communion with the dead. The next chamber opens before us, the hall of mathematics and astronomy. Here, the pigeonholes contain not just scrolls but also instruments. There's an astrolabe, its bronze surface dull with age but still functional. A set of compass-marked circles for drawing perfect geometric figures. Wax tablets covered with calculations that someone will erase tomorrow to begin again. A cool breeze moves through this hall, coming from high windows that we cannot see in the darkness. It carries with it the faint scent of the sea, reminding us that Alexandria is a city of water and commerce, even as it is a city of the mind. The sound of our footsteps changes as we move from marble to a floor of fitted limestone blocks, each one perfectly level, perfectly placed. The ancient builders understood that a library must be stable, that even the smallest tilt or settling could damage the precious scrolls. These floors have not shifted in 200 years. We pause before a particularly grand pigeonhole, one marked with a placard of hammered bronze. Euclid the Elements, complete with commentaries. 13 scrolls, arranged in order, representing the foundation of all geometric knowledge. How many hands have touched these scrolls? How many minds have been shaped by these theorems? There's a reverence here, a weight to the silence that feels almost religious. And perhaps that's what this is, a temple, but one dedicated not to gods who demand sacrifice, but to human reason, to the divine spark of understanding that separates us from the animals. We continue deeper into the library, into halls we have not yet explored. Each chamber has its own character, its own collection. The Hall of Medicine, where anatomical drawings on specially treated papyrus show the inner workings of the human body. The Hall of Poetry, where the verses of Homer, Sappho, and Hesiod wait in the darkness. Their words of love and war and loss sleeping until someone awakens them with reading. The oil lamps burn steadily, their flames reflected in the polished marble, creating pools of warm light in the vast darkness. A night attendant passes us, nodding respectfully. He carries a small amphora of oil and a cleaning rod, making his rounds, ensuring that the light never fails. His sandals make the same soft sound against the stone that ours do. A whisper, a gentle percussion that seems to say, knowledge, knowledge, knowledge with each step. The smell of papyrus grows stronger as we enter the hall of the catalogs, the heart of the library, where the great shelves hold not literature or philosophy, but the meticulously maintained records of everything the library contains. Here, teams of scribes work during the day, updating the catalogs as new works arrive from every corner of the world. They record not just titles and authors, but also the condition of each scroll, where it came from, who donated or sold it, sometimes even notes about variant readings or questionable attributions. It is painstaking work. It is essential work. Tonight, the tables are empty, the stools pushed back, the inkwells capped, but the evidence of the day's labor remains. Fresh entries drying on new papyrus, quills resting in their holders, sand for blotting scattered across one table where someone worked in haste and left disorder behind. We stand in the center of this hall, surrounded by the catalogs of human knowledge, and listen to the silence. But it is not truly silent. There is the breathing of the lamps, the settling of the ancient building as the cool night air contracts stone and wood, the distant Mediterranean whispering beyond the city walls. And beneath it all, if you listen carefully, you can almost hear the whisper of all these words, all these ideas, all this preserved human thought, waiting patiently in the darkness for dawn to bring the scholars back. We leave the Hall of Catalogues and move toward the western wing, where the most ancient texts reside. The temperature drops slightly here. These rooms face away from the morning sun, kept deliberately cool to preserve what cannot be replaced. The doorway before us is narrower than the others, framed in dark wood imported from Lebanon. Cedar. You can still smell it faintly, even after all these years. A sharp, clean scent that cuts through the papyrus and lamp oil. The ancients knew that cedar repels insects, those tiny destroyers that can reduce a scroll to powder given enough time. As we cross the threshold, our eyes adjust to the dimmer light. Fewer lamps burn here. The night attendants are more cautious in these rooms, more deliberate in their movements. The scrolls here are fragile, some so delicate that they can only be unrolled by the most experienced hands, and even then only when absolutely necessary. This is the Hall of Ancient Egypt. The pigeonholes here contain works written in hieratic script, the cursive form of the sacred hieroglyphs. These are texts that predate Alexandria itself by 1,000 years or more, medical papyri from the time of the pyramid builders, astronomical observations recorded when Memphis was still the greatest city in the world, religious texts that speak of gods whose worship has now faded into ritual and remembrance. There's a particular quality to the papyrus here. It's darker, more brittle. The fibers have begun to separate in places, creating a delicate lacework that threatens to crumble at the slightest touch. The scribes who maintain these works don't copy them onto fresh papyrus. To do so would be to lose something essential, some connection to the hands that first formed these letters. Instead, they create detailed descriptions, careful notes about what each text contains, preserving the knowledge even as the medium slowly returns to dust. A small statue stands in an alcove, Thoth, the ibis-headed god of writing and wisdom. Someone has left an offering before it. A small cake of bread, now growing stale, and a cup of beer that has evaporated to a sticky residue. The old gods may be fading, but here, in this hall of their words, they are still honored. We move carefully through this space, our footsteps even softer now, as though the weight of antiquity demands greater reverence. There's a reading desk here, different from the ones in the other halls. It's made of ivory and ebony, inlaid with gold, and it tilts at a precise angle designed to support the most fragile scrolls without stressing them. On it rests a papyrus partially unrolled. We approach carefully, and in the lamplight we can see the text. It's a medical treatise, diagrams showing surgical instruments that would not look entirely out of place in a modern physician's kit. A curved blade for making incisions. A bronze clamp for stopping bleeding. Instructions written in a calm, methodical hand about how to treat a fractured skull. The ink has faded to a rusty brown, the color of dried blood. Appropriate, perhaps, for a surgical text. Beside the scroll lies a piece of broken pottery, an ostracan used as a notepad. Someone has scribbled a translation in Greek, working to make this ancient Egyptian knowledge accessible to contemporary scholars. The work of the library continues, even in these quiet hours. We leave the Hall of Ancient Egypt and enter a corridor. This passage is narrower, more intimate. The walls here are not marble but painted plaster, decorated with scenes of scholars at work. You can see them in the lamplight. A man reading a scroll, his expression thoughtful. A woman, yes, a woman, pointing at a celestial globe while students gather around. The artist captured the intensity in their faces, the hunger for understanding. The plaster is old, and in places it has cracked, creating fissures that run through the painted figures like wounds. But even damaged, they serve their purpose. They remind us that knowledge is not passive, not simply stored and kept. It is active, living, passed from mind to mind across generations. The floor here is different too. Simple clay tiles, reddish-brown, practical rather than beautiful. They're worn in the center from countless feet following this same path, seeking what lies ahead. And what lies ahead is the Hall of Eastern Wisdom. The doorway is carved with unfamiliar symbols, Sanskrit, Persian, even some characters from distant lands whose languages we are only beginning to understand. Alexandria is an empire city, a meeting place of East and West, and the library reflects this. The scent changes as we enter. There's sandalwood here, burned as incense to honor the provenance of these texts. And something else, a spice we cannot quite name, carried in the fabric of the scrolls themselves, absorbed during their long journey from Persia, from India, from beyond the edges of the maps. The scrolls here are different. Some are written on palm leaves, carefully pressed and dried, strung together on cords. Others are on fabrics, silk from the distant East, cotton from India, materials that hold ink differently than papyrus, that feel alien to Greek hands. There's a table here where translation work happens. You can see the evidence. A Persian text laid out alongside a Greek version in progress, the translator's notes scattered between them. Someone is working to render the poetry of Zoroaster into Greek verse, struggling to capture not just the meaning but the music of the original words. It's imperfect work. Something always gets lost in translation: nuance, wordplay, the cultural context that a native reader would instinctively understand. But the attempt itself is noble. The library is not just a repository. It is a bridge, connecting minds across vast distances of geography and culture. A night attendant approaches us here, an older man with a kind face and eyes that have spent decades reading by lamplight. He nods a greeting and gestures to a particular section of shelves, as if offering a recommendation. We approach and see what he's indicating. A series of scrolls bound with red cord, the color denoting special significance. The tag reads, Buddhist Sutras, translated from Pali by Asoka's mission. These texts traveled further than almost anything else in the library. From India, carried by monks who walk thousands of miles to share their teachings. The papyrus is newer than most around it. These are recent acquisitions, still crisp, still holding the shape of their first rolling. The attendant touches one gently, almost affectionately, then moves on with his lamp and oil, leaving us in contemplative silence. We stand before these scrolls from the edges of the known world and consider the ambition of this place. To gather all knowledge, from all peoples in all languages. To preserve it, to study it, to let it cross-pollinate and create new understanding. It's an impossible dream, perhaps. But here, in this hall, in this moment, it feels almost achievable. We return to the main corridor and continue our journey deeper into the library's western reaches. The building seems to grow quieter still, if such a thing is possible. Even the lamps seem to burn more softly here, their flames barely moving in the still air. There's a staircase ahead, descending. The steps are worn smooth, dipping in the center from use. We take them carefully, one hand on the cool stone wall for balance, watching the lamplight play across the walls. Down here, the air is cooler and damper. We're below ground level now, in the vaults where the most precious and dangerous texts are kept. Precious because of their rarity, their age, their irreplaceable nature. Dangerous because of their content, works that challenge orthodoxy, that propose revolutionary ideas that could, in the wrong hands or at the wrong moment, spark controversy or worse. The library preserves everything, even dangerous knowledge, perhaps especially dangerous knowledge. The vaults stretch before us, a series of chambers carved directly into the limestone bedrock beneath Alexandria. The walls here are rough-hewn, unmarked by the decorative arts visible above. This is purely functional space, designed for preservation rather than beauty. The dampness we noticed on the stairs is controlled, carefully managed. Bronze braziers stand in the corners, but they burn a different fuel here. Aromatic woods mixed with salts that draw moisture from the air without creating too much heat. The result is an atmosphere that feels preserved, suspended, as though time itself moves more slowly in these underground rooms. The light is even dimmer here. Only every third lamp is lit, creating pools of shadow between small islands of illumination. Our footsteps echo differently against bare stone, a harder sound, less forgiving than the marble above. We pass a junction where 3 corridors meet, and there, standing guard, is another night attendant. This one is younger, armed with a short staff, not for violence, but as a symbol of authority. Access to the vaults is restricted even at night, perhaps especially at night. He recognizes our purpose and steps aside, gesturing us forward into the leftmost passage. This corridor is lined with wooden doors, each one reinforced with bronze bands. Small windows set at eye level allow inspection without opening the doors, and through them we can glimpse what lies beyond. Rooms filled with locked chests, sealed clay jars, even cages of bronze wire containing scrolls too fragile to touch. We stop at one door marked with a symbol, a serpent eating its tail, the Ouroboros, the symbol of eternity, of cycles, of wisdom that consumes and renews itself. Through the window, we see a collection of alchemical texts, the earliest attempts to understand the transformation of matter, to find the divine principles underlying the physical world. These works are controversial. Many dismiss alchemy as superstition, as the delusions of men who seek to turn lead into gold. But the library does not judge, preserves. And within these scrolls, mixed with mysticism and impossible dreams, there are genuine observations about the nature of substances, about chemical reactions, about processes that future generations will refine into true science. The smell here is different, metallic, sharp. Some of these scrolls were written in workshops where experiments were conducted, and they absorbed the sense of sulfur, mercury, salt. Even sealed in their containers, they carry the memory of fire and transformation. We continue down the corridor and come to a larger chamber. The door here is open, attended by an elderly scholar who sits on a stool, reading by the light of 2 oil lamps. He's so absorbed in his work that he doesn't notice our approach. The scroll before him is enormous, longer than any we've seen above. It's unrolled across a special table that extends nearly the width of the room, held flat by glass weights at intervals. Even from a distance, we can see it's a map. Not just any map. This is one of the great works of Eratosthenes, the previous chief librarian, who calculated the circumference of the earth with astonishing accuracy using nothing but shadows, geometry, and reasoning. The map shows the known world from Britannia to India, from the Scythian wastes to the mountains of the moon in distant Africa. The scholar's finger traces a route along the coast of Libya, and he makes notes on a wax tablet beside him, perhaps planning a journey, perhaps verifying reports from travelers, perhaps simply lost in the wonder of how vast the world is, how much there is yet to discover. We watch him for a moment, this solitary figure pursuing knowledge while the city sleeps. Then we move on, leaving him to his geography. The next chamber we enter is the coldest yet. The vault door is heavy, and pushing it open requires effort. Inside, the air is almost frigid, maintained by a system of ventilation shafts that draw cool air from deep underground and expel the warmer air above. This is where the most ancient works are kept, scrolls so old that they predate even the Egyptian texts above. Some are Sumerian, written in cuneiform on clay tablets rather than papyrus. Others are Akkadian, Hittite, remnants of empires that fell so long ago that their very names are becoming legends. The clay tablets sit on wooden shelves, each one catalogued and positioned with extraordinary care. They're heavy, these tablets, and permanent in a way that papyrus can never be. Fire might destroy papyrus, but it only hardens clay. Flood might dissolve papyrus to pulp, but clay endures. We approach one shelf and read the labels. Epic of Gilgamesh, tablets 1 to 12, complete. Enuma Elish, the creation epic. The Code of Hammurabi, sections concerning property law. These are the voices of civilizations that existed 2,000 years before Alexandria was even imagined. And yet here they are, preserved, protected, still speaking to anyone willing to listen. There's a reading table here as well, but it's designed differently, lower, heavier, built to support the weight of clay tablets. Someone has been working recently. A tablet rests on the table and beside it, a careful Greek translation in progress. The translator has left notes in the margins. Meaning uncertain, consult Babylonian dictionary, possible reference to flood myth, compare Hebrew texts, poetic metaphor or literal description. Even the most skilled translators struggle with these ancient languages. The context is so remote, the cultural references so alien. Sometimes a word can only be guessed at, its meaning inferred from the words around it, from parallel texts, from educated speculation. But the work continues. Every generation of scholars adds to the understanding, refines the translations, discovers new connections. The library is patient. Truth emerges slowly, like a mosaic assembled one tiny tile at a time. A drop of water falls from the ceiling, landing with a soft plink in a bronze bowl positioned to catch it. Even this deep moisture seeps through the stone. The attendants empty these bowls regularly, ensuring that no dampness threatens the tablets. We leave the tablet room and return to the main vault corridor. Ahead, we see stairs ascending, but we're not ready to return to the upper levels yet. There's one more chamber to visit, one more collection to witness. The door to this final vault is marked differently from the others. Instead of symbols or script, it bears a simple bronze lock, and hanging beside it is a clay seal stamped with the mark of the head librarian himself. This is the most restricted collection in the entire library. The door is locked, but through the window we can see inside. The room is small, intimate. Unlike the other vaults, this one is warm, lit by more lamps than seems necessary. The walls are painted a deep red, the color of wine, of blood, of passion. This is where the forbidden texts are kept. Not forbidden by law, Alexandria is remarkably tolerant, but forbidden by custom, by propriety. Works of explicit poetry, treatises on practices that polite society condemns, political writings so inflammatory that merely possessing them in some kingdoms would mean death. The library preserves these too. Human knowledge includes human passion, human vice, human rebellion. To omit these would be to present a false picture of what we are. We cannot enter this room, but we can see enough. Scrolls with titles that would make a senator blush. political manifestos arguing for the overthrow of tyranny, religious texts deemed heretical by their own faiths, preserved here because somewhere, someday, someone might need to understand what their ancestors believed and why it was condemned. A night attendant approaches and politely but firmly guides us away from this door. Some knowledge requires permission, requires maturity, requires context that we may not possess. The library is open, but it is not careless. We acquiesce and turn toward the ascending stairs. Our time in the vaults has shown us the depth of this collection, the breadth of human thought preserved beneath the earth. But the night is not over, and there are other halls yet to explore. As we climb back toward the main level, the air grows warmer, the light brighter. We hear, faintly, the sound of voices, other scholars moving through the midnight halls, pursuing their own quests for understanding. The library is never truly empty. Knowledge is a thing that draws people in the darkness, a light that burns even when the sun has set. We emerge from the vaults into the main corridor, and the change is immediate. The oppressive weight of stone and earth lifts from our shoulders. The air moves here, flowing gently through the halls, carrying with it the familiar sense of papyrus and lamp oil, now almost comforting after the metallic coldness below. The marble floor feels warm beneath our feet, still holding some memory of the day's sun despite the hours of darkness. We turn eastward now, toward the rising moon, following a corridor we haven't yet explored. The walls here are decorated with painted panels showing the great thinkers of the past. Aristotle with his hand raised in discourse, Pythagoras contemplating geometric shapes, Sappho, lyre in hand, her painted eyes gazing into some distant vision. The paint is old, cracking in places, but the artistry remains clear. These are not just portraits, they are invitations, reminders that we walk among giants, even if those giants now exist only as words on papyrus. A bronze plaque on the wall marks our destination, the Hall of Natural Philosophy and the Living World. This hall is different from all the others. Even before we enter, we can hear something unusual, a soft rustling, an occasional chirp, sounds of life. The doorway opens into a space that is part library, part museum, part menagerie. Yes, the walls are lined with the familiar pigeonholes filled with scrolls, works by Aristotle on animals, Theophrastus on plants, Herodotus's accounts of strange creatures in distant lands. But interspersed among the shelves are glass cases, bronze cages, clay vessels sealed with wax. In one glass case, we see the preserved skeleton of a crocodile, its bones bleached white and wired together in a perfect articulation. Beside it, a scroll describes its anatomy, its behaviors, its role in Egyptian mythology and daily life. In a bronze cage near the window, a small owl blinks at us, its enormous eyes reflecting the lamplight. It's awake now in its natural element. Beside the cage, notes in cramped handwriting detail its hunting patterns, its diet, the mechanics of its silent flight. This is not mere imprisonment. This is study, observation, the patient cataloging of life. We move deeper into the hall, and the collection becomes more elaborate. There are clay vessels containing specimens preserved in honey, insects, small fish, even a tiny snake, all suspended in golden amber, arrested at the moment of death. The honey keeps them perfect, incorruptible, available for study generations hence. Hanging from the ceiling on nearly invisible wires are the shells of sea creatures, spiraling nautilus chambers, spiny murex shells that yield the purple dye of emperors, delicate coral branches like frozen lightning. They turn slowly in the air currents, casting strange shadows on the walls. There's a large table in the center of the room, and on it, someone has arranged a display of seeds and dried plants, each labeled with meticulous care. Silphium, from Cyrenaica, used for medicine and cooking, becoming rare. Papyrus, Cyperus papyrus, the foundation of our written world. Wheat, Triticum variety from the Nile Delta. Note the robust ear structure. The scholar who works here, a botanist we assume, has left his tools. Bronze scissors for taking cuttings, small clay pots for germinating seeds, a magnifying lens of polished crystal that catches the lamplight and throws a bright spot on the ceiling. In the corner, there's something that stops us in our tracks. A complete elephant skull, enormous and ancient, its ivory tusks yellowed with age. The scroll beside it explains that it was brought from India at tremendous expense. A gift from a merchant prince who wished to curry favor with the Ptolemaic court. The skull sits on a reinforced platform, and someone, perhaps multiple generations of scholars, has studied every inch of it. Diagrams on papyrus show measurements, comparisons to human skulls, speculations about how such a massive creature can be supported by its bones, how it thinks with such a large brain, how it uses that remarkable trunk. There are notes about elephants in war, their intelligence, their memory, their social structures. The ancients are trying to understand not just anatomy, but consciousness itself. What is it like to be an elephant? Do they mourn their dead? Do they remember kindness or cruelty? These questions cannot be fully answered, but the asking of them, that is what makes this place sacred. We hear footsteps and turn to see a scholar entering the hall. She's perhaps 30, wearing the simple robes of a researcher, her hair bound up practically. She carries a covered basket, and from within it comes a soft peeping sound. She nods to us politely and moves to one of the bronze cages, an empty one, freshly cleaned. From her basket, she removes a small bird, examining it carefully in the lamplight. It's young, perhaps injured or orphaned. She places it gently in the cage, adds water and grain, then begins making notes on a wax tablet. "Sparrow," she murmurs to herself, though we can hear. "Common house sparrow, appears to have injured left wing. Will monitor for 3 days, observe healing process, compare to Aristotle's notes on avian bone repair." She works with such gentle competence, such clear dedication. This is not just scholarship. This is compassion in the service of understanding. The library preserves not just scrolls, but life itself when it can, turning even rescue into an opportunity for learning. She finishes her notes and turns to leave, then pauses, noticing our interest. "The night is the best time for observation," she says quietly. "The creatures are calmer. You can hear their true sounds without the noise of the day." She gestures to the owl. "That one has taught me more about nocturnal hunting than a dozen scrolls. You must see the living thing to truly understand what the ancient texts describe." She departs, and we're left alone again with the specimens, the scrolls, the quiet breathing of the caged owl. There's a philosophical weight to this hall. In the other chambers, we encountered human knowledge, mathematics, poetry, history, philosophy. But here, we confront the vast indifference of nature, the intricate machinery of life that existed long before humans learned to write and will continue long after our civilizations crumble. And yet, these scholars persist in their study. They measure, record, compare, theorize. They try to find patterns in the chaos, meaning in the mechanism. They ask, what are the principles that govern life? What connects the smallest insect to the largest elephant? We move toward the eastern wall of the hall, where tall windows look out over the sleeping city. The moon has risen higher now, nearly full, bathing Alexandria in silver light. From here we can see the harbor, the lighthouse on Pharos Island sending its beam across the dark waters. Ships rock gently at anchor, waiting for dawn to resume their voyages. The library stands between the sea and the desert, between the practical world of commerce and the infinite emptiness of sand. It is a human construction, fragile in the cosmic scale, yet filled with such ambition, such hope. On the windowsill, someone has left a potted plant, a small olive tree no more than 2 feet tall. Its leaves are silver green in the moonlight. Beside it, a note, olive cultivar from Athens, planted year 3 of Ptolemy IV, observing growth patterns away from native soil. Even this, a simple tree in a pot, becomes a subject of study, a question to be answered. Can Athens grow in Egypt? Can knowledge transplant across cultures as plants transplant across climates? Will it thrive or merely survive or wither entirely? The library asks these questions through everything it does. We leave the Hall of Natural Philosophy and return to the main corridor. The night is deepening, moving toward that darkest hour before dawn when even the most dedicated scholars begin to tire, when the oil in the lamps burns lower and the attendants make their most frequent rounds. Ahead, we hear something unexpected, music. It's faint, ethereal, the sound of a lyre being played with exquisite skill. The melody is ancient, something that predates even Homer, passed down through generations of musicians who learned it by ear before anyone thought to write it down. We follow the sound through a series of smaller passages, away from the grand halls and into the more intimate spaces of the library. These corridors are narrower, more domestic in scale. The walls are lined with wooden panels rather than marble, creating a warmer, more resonant acoustic. The music grows clearer. There are words now, sung in a clear tenor voice. The language is archaic Greek, the dialect of Mycenae, barely comprehensible even to educated Alexandrian ears. But the emotion transcends language. This is a song of loss, of longing, of heroes dead and cities fallen. We reach a doorway hung with a curtain of linen, and through it, we can see the source of the music. A small chamber, perhaps a private study, lit by a cluster of oil lamps that create a warm, golden glow. Seated on a simple stool is a man of perhaps 50 years, his beard streaked with gray, his fingers dancing across the strings of a beautifully crafted lyre. Before him on a reading stand is a scroll, one of the oldest in the library. We can tell by its darkness, its fragility. It's a collection of songs, notation marks indicating rhythm and pitch alongside the ancient words. He's not just reading the song. He's resurrecting it, bringing it back to life after centuries of silence. He finishes the verse and pauses, making notes on a wax tablet. Then he begins again, adjusting a phrase, changing the emphasis, trying to capture something that exists only in hints and fragments on the ancient papyrus. This is another kind of scholarship, not the analytical study of texts, but the performative resurrection of culture. Music, unlike philosophy, cannot be fully preserved in writing. The notations are incomplete, ambiguous. To truly understand ancient music, you must make it live again, must fill in the gaps with intuition and artistry. We stand quietly in the doorway, not wishing to disturb. The musician senses our presence and looks up, offering a tired smile. "Forgive me," he says. "I lose track of time when I work with these old songs. They demand to be heard, not just read." He gestures to the scroll. This one claims to be from the court of Agamemnon himself. Almost certainly not. It's probably only 500 or 600 years old. He laughs softly. Only. But still, imagine. Someone sang this when Aristotle was young, when the Parthenon was new. And now here I am, learning it again, keeping it alive a little longer. He plays a few more notes, then carefully rolls the scroll and returns it to its case. The night is for the old songs, he says. During the day, there are too many distractions, too many people. But at night, in the silence, you can hear what the ancients meant. You can feel how the music should breathe. He stands, stretches, picks up his lyre. I'll leave you to your wandering. There's much yet to see before dawn. And with that, he departs, humming softly to himself. We're alone in the music chamber now. The reading stand still holds the empty scroll case. On the walls, we notice for the first time, there are painted instruments. Flutes, drums, lyres, even stranger devices we cannot name. This room is dedicated to the preservation of sound, that most ephemeral of human creations. There are other scrolls here carefully stored. Treatises on musical theory by Pythagoras and his followers, who believed that music and mathematics were fundamentally connected, that the harmony of strings reflected the harmony of the spheres. Instruction manuals for constructing instruments. Collections of songs from every corner of the known world. Egyptian funeral hymns, Persian court music, Celtic war chants written down by travelers who heard them in distant Gaul. On a shelf, there are actual instruments available for study. A double flute made of bone and bronze. A small drum with a skin head stretched tight. A set of bronze bells that ring in perfect mathematical intervals. Someone has left a note. Pythagorean intervals confirmed. Octave, fifth, fourth all produce consonant ratios when measured. Even in art, the library seeks underlying principles, mathematical truths that govern beauty. We leave the music chamber and continue our nocturnal journey. The corridor slopes gently upward now, and we realize we're climbing toward the upper levels of the library, spaces we haven't yet explored. The air grows fresher, touched by breezes from high windows. The smell of papyrus is lighter here, mixed with the scent of ink, fresh ink, recently prepared. These must be the scribal halls, where the work of copying texts takes place. We reach a landing where the corridor opens into a large, airy space. Even at night, this room feels bright, designed to capture every available ray of sun during working hours. The windows are tall and numerous, facing east to catch the morning light. The room is filled with desks, dozens of them, arranged in neat rows. Each desk has its implements. Inkwells filled with black and red ink, reed pens cut and ready, pumice stones for smoothing papyrus, straight edges for keeping lines even, knives for scraping away errors. The desks are empty now, the scribes long gone to their beds. But the evidence of their day's work remains. On one desk, a partially completed copy of Herodotus's Histories lies weighted down, the fresh ink barely dry. On another, someone has been copying geometric diagrams, the circles and angles rendered with painstaking precision. There's a beauty to this room that the grander halls lack. This is where the real work of preservation happens. The great scholars theorize and discover, but the humble scribes ensure that their work survives. Every scroll in the library exists because someone sat at a desk like these and copied it, letter by letter, word by word, maintaining perfect accuracy across hours of meticulous labor. It's exhausting work. We can see evidence of the strain. Wax tablets where scribes practiced difficult passages, notes reminding themselves to check spellings in the reference copies, small complaints scratched into desktop wood. My hand aches. 3 more pages, then rest. This author's handwriting is abominable. But there's pride here too. Some scribes have signed their work in tiny letters at the end of scrolls, copied faithfully by Demetrios in the 3rd year of Ptolemy V. They know they're not creating, they're preserving. But preservation is its own form of creation. Without these anonymous copyists, even the greatest works would fade, victims of time and fragility. We notice a senior scribe's desk at the front of the room, distinguished by its finer wood and extra equipment. Here sits the master copy, the authorized version that all other copies must match. The responsibility of maintaining accuracy rests with this person, who checks every completed scroll against the original, marking errors, ensuring that knowledge passes forward uncorrupted. Near the windows, there's a small shrine, just a niche in the wall containing a tiny statue of Thoth, painted in faded colors. Before it, offerings. A used pen, a scrap of papyrus with a prayer written in careful letters, a small lamp that burns even now. The scribes honor the god of writing because they understand the sacred nature of their work. Every letter they form is an act of faith. Faith that the future will care about the past, that knowledge is worth preserving, that human understanding can accumulate across generations. We stand in this room, empty yet full of purpose, and feel the weight of those countless hours of copying, checking, preserving. The library's glory is built on this foundation. Not the marble halls or the bronze doors, but the patient, unglamorous work of people whose names history will never record. From somewhere above, we hear footsteps. The upper levels await, holding their own treasures, their own stories. The night is waning, but our exploration continues. We find the stairs at the far end of the scribal hall, a spiral staircase of stone, worn smooth in the center from countless ascents and descents. The steps are narrower than those we've encountered before, clearly designed for the staff rather than the visiting scholars. Our hands trail along the cool stone wall as we climb, turning around and around in the confined space. The stairwell is lit by small niches carved into the wall, each holding a single lamp. The flames create a hypnotic pattern as we spiral upward. Light, shadow, light, shadow. A rhythm that makes the climb feel almost meditative. We emerge onto the second level, and immediately the character of the library changes. The ceilings here are lower, the spaces more intimate. These are not grand public halls, but working rooms, storage areas, the practical heart of the library's operation. The first room we enter is filled with materials, rolls of fresh papyrus stacked carefully on shelves, bundles of reeds for making pens, blocks of carbon for ink making, pots of gum arabic, jars of minerals for creating colored inks. This is the supply depot, ensuring that the scribes below never lack for materials. There's a particular smell here, the green, vegetable scent of fresh papyrus, not yet aged into the familiar aroma of the scrolls. Someone has been working recently. We can see where sheets have been cut to size, trimmed edges lying in neat piles ready to be swept away. On a workbench, there's an array of tools for papyrus preparation. Wooden mallets for pounding the reed strips, sharp knives for trimming, stone weights for pressing the sheets as they dry, a basin of water for moistening the fibers. The process of transforming reeds into writing material is ancient, perfected over millennia in Egypt, and here in Alexandria it continues unchanged. A night attendant appears from a back room, carrying an armload of fresh papyrus sheets. He's younger than most we've encountered, perhaps an apprentice learning the library's systems. He startles slightly at seeing us, then relaxes and nods respectfully. "Preparing for tomorrow," he says, his voice hushed in the nocturnal quiet. The copying work never stops. We go through hundreds of sheets each week. He sets down his burden with care and wipes his hands on his robe. Sometimes I think about it. Every sheet that passes through here might hold words that last 1,000 years. Or it might just be a practice copy, scraped clean and reused. You never know which words will matter to the future. He departs, and we continue our exploration of the second level. The next chamber we discover is smaller, more specialized. Here, the restoration work takes place. Damaged scrolls are brought here to be repaired, their tiers mended, their fragments pieced together like puzzles. A large table dominates the room, its surface covered with a damaged scroll carefully weighted flat. The papyrus is broken in several places, its edges crumbling. Around the scroll are tools of the restorer's trade. Tiny brushes, adhesives made from wheat paste, strips of new papyrus cut to size for patching, weights of various sizes for holding repairs in place while they dry. This scroll is old, we can see that even in our limited lamplight. The text appears to be mathematical, filled with diagrams and calculations. Someone has made notes on a separate papyrus. Unknown work, possibly pre-Euclidean. 3 sections missing, text fragmentary. Restore what can be saved, document what is lost. The work is painstaking, almost surgical. Too much moisture and the old papyrus will disintegrate entirely. Too little and the new patches won't adhere. The restorers must work with perfect judgment, balancing preservation against intervention. On the walls of the restoration room, there are shelves containing the fragments that couldn't be saved. Pieces of scrolls too damaged to repair, preserved here as evidence of what once existed. Each fragment is stored in a small wooden box, labeled with whatever information could be gleaned. Fragment appears to be lyric poetry. Unknown author, estimated 200 years old. Fragment, astronomical observations. Language uncertain, possibly Chaldean. These fragments are heartbreaking. Each one represents lost knowledge, questions that can never be answered, voices silenced by time and accident. Yet even in their brokenness, they're preserved, catalogued, respected. The library refuses to forget, even when forgetting would be easier than maintaining these painful reminders of impermanence. There's a meditation in this room, a lesson in humility. Despite all efforts, despite the best minds and the most careful hands, some knowledge will be lost. The library can slow this process, can fight against entropy, but it cannot stop it entirely. The restorers work not in certainty of success, but in defiance of inevitable decay. We notice a small personal shrine in the corner, not Thoth this time, but a Greek deity. Athena, goddess of wisdom and craft. Someone has left fresh flowers, now wilting in a small vase. Even the gods cannot guarantee the survival of knowledge, but still we ask for their blessing. Leaving the restoration room, we follow a corridor that runs along the building's exterior. Here, there are windows looking out over Alexandria. The city is still dark, still sleeping, but there are signs of coming dawn. A subtle lightening of the eastern sky, the first calls of roosters from the residential quarters, the smell of baking bread as the city's ovens begin their work. The library stands above it all, wakeful and patient. From this height, we can see the great lighthouse more clearly, its fire burning steadily, guiding ships that won't arrive for hours yet. We can see the palace complex, dark and quiet, where kings sleep and dream of empire. We can see the harbor, the masts of ships like a leafless forest. And we can see the Jewish quarter, the Egyptian temples, the Greek gymnasium, the marketplaces, all the diverse elements that make Alexandria more than just an Egyptian city or a Greek colony. It's a crossroads, a meeting place, a crucible where cultures blend and clash and create something new. The library reflects this. In every hall we've walked, we've seen the evidence. Greek philosophy beside Egyptian medicine, Persian poetry alongside Hebrew scripture, Indian thought meeting African wisdom. The library doesn't just preserve individual cultures. It preserves the conversation between them. We turn from the window and discover one final room on this level, and it's unlike anything we've yet encountered. The door is marked simply, Maps and Instruments. Inside, the walls are covered with maps of every size and description. Some are painted on wood panels, others drawn on papyrus or vellum, still others carved into stone or molded in clay. They show the world as different cultures understand it. Greek maps placing the Mediterranean at the center, Persian maps highlighting the great roads of empire, Indian maps showing trade routes to distant Cathay, Egyptian maps detailing every bend and ford of the Nile. In the center of the room stands a large bronze globe, perhaps 3 feet in diameter, mounted on a wooden stand that allows it to rotate. This is a model of the Earth, marked with latitude and longitude lines, showing continents and seas based on the accumulated knowledge of travelers and merchants and explorers. Someone, Eratosthenes perhaps, or one of his students, has calculated where everything should be, has transformed travelers' tales and sailors' reports into geometric certainty. Some of it is accurate. Some of it is speculation. The far reaches of Africa are marked unknown. The ocean beyond India is labeled, Here be mysteries. Around the walls are other instruments, astrolabes for measuring the positions of stars, sundials showing the hours in different cities across the empire, a complex bronze mechanism that seems to model the motions of the moon and planets, an astronomical calculator of such intricacy that we can barely comprehend its purpose. There are tools for making maps, compasses for drawing circles, rulers marked with different scales, protractors for measuring angles, calculating devices strung with beads for converting measurements from one system to another. This room represents humanity's desire not just to know the world, but to measure it, to quantify it, to make it comprehensible through number and proportion. It's the mathematical impulse applied to geography, the same force that drives the geometers and astronomers in the halls below. We approach the globe and spin it gently. It rotates smoothly on its bearings, the painted continents blurring into bands of color. Somewhere on this bronze surface is a tiny mark representing Alexandria, representing this library, representing this very room where we stand. We are here, mapping the world, locating ourselves in space and time. The sky outside continues to lighten. Dawn is approaching. Our night in the library is drawing toward its close, but there is still time for one final exploration before the scholars of the day arrive and reclaim these halls for their work. We leave the map room and find another staircase, this one even narrower than the last. It spirals upward into what must be the highest reaches of the library. The steps are steeper here, clearly not meant for regular traffic. These are the towers, the observation points, the private retreats of the head librarians and their most trusted scholars. The air grows thinner as we climb, or perhaps it's just the exertion making our breath come shorter. The lamplight flickers more dramatically here, caught by drafts that slip through gaps in the stone. We can hear the wind now, something we haven't heard in the sheltered halls below. A soft whistling around corners, the breath of the Mediterranean carrying the promise of morning. Finally, we emerge onto the third level. Here, the architecture becomes almost residential. These are private chambers, Small studies where scholars can retreat from the bustle of the main halls to think, to write, to grapple with problems too complex for distraction. The first door we pass is closed, but we can see light beneath it and hear the soft scratch of pen on papyrus. Someone is working through the night, so absorbed in their thoughts that they haven't noticed the approaching dawn. We continue down the corridor and find a door standing open. Inside is a scholar's cell, spartanly furnished but clearly lived in. A narrow bed with rumpled linens suggests someone who sleeps here more often than at home. A desk covered with scrolls and wax tablets speaks of work that never truly ends. A small brazier provides warmth, and beside it, a kettle for making the herbal infusions that keep tired minds alert. On the walls, this scholar has pinned various notes and diagrams, sketches of mechanisms, mathematical formulae, questions written in several languages. Why does the moon's shadow move across the earth during an eclipse? Can the distance to the stars be calculated? What force keeps the planets in their courses? These are not questions that can be answered in a day or a year or perhaps even a lifetime. But they are being asked, being pondered, being passed from one generation of thinkers to the next. The library enables this continuity of thought, this conversation across time. A personal touch catches our eye. A small clay figurine on the windowsill, crudely made, perhaps by a child. Even the most dedicated scholars have families, lives beyond these walls. This figurine is a tether to that other world, a reminder of why the work matters. We move on, climbing one final staircase to the very top of the library. This is not a room but a rooftop terrace, open to the sky. The wind is stronger here, whipping our robes, bringing the salt smell of the sea mixing with the bakery scents rising from the waking city. The view is breathtaking. From here, we can see all of Alexandria spread before us like a living map. The grid streets, the parks and plazas, the canal system that brings Nile water into the city, the great harbor with its protective moles and the lighthouse standing sentinel on Pharos Island. The sky is transforming now. The deep indigo of night is giving way to purple, then to rose, then to gold at the eastern horizon. Stars are fading, their light overwhelmed by the approaching sun. The moon, which guided us through so much of our journey, hangs pale and ghostly in the western sky, preparing to set. Up here, someone has created a small observatory. There's a bronze armillary sphere for tracking celestial motions, a water clock for timing astronomical observations, stone markers aligned with significant points on the horizon where sun and stars rise at different times of year. Scrolls are stored here too, protected in a bronze chest against the weather. We open it carefully and find astronomical tables, records of planetary positions, predictions of eclipses years into the future. There are observational logs, Venus visible before dawn, 3 fingers above horizon, clear sky, noted by Apollonius. Some of these observations go back decades. The library's astronomers are patient, knowing that understanding the heavens requires watching them through seasons, through years, through generations. Patterns emerge slowly. The universe does not reveal its secrets to the hasty. We stand at the eastern edge of the terrace and watch as the sun touches the horizon. The first direct rays of light stream across the water, turning the Mediterranean from black to deep blue to brilliant turquoise. The lighthouse flame becomes invisible, overwhelmed by the greater light. Fishing boats that seem to materialize from nowhere are heading out to sea, their sails catching the morning breeze. Below us, in the streets, we can hear the city coming to life. Merchants opening their shops, children being sent on errands, animals being driven to market. The endless, beautiful chaos of human life beginning another day. But here, on the library's roof, there's a moment of perfect stillness. The night scholars haven't yet emerged from their work. The day scholars haven't yet arrived. We exist in this transitional space, this threshold between darkness and light. A door opens behind us, and an elderly man steps onto the terrace. He's wrapped in a heavy robe against the morning chill, and he moves with the careful deliberation of age. He doesn't seem surprised to find us here. Perhaps he's accustomed to encountering other wakeful souls in this place. He joins us at the eastern parapet, saying nothing, simply watching the sunrise. After a long moment, he speaks. "I come up here every morning," he says, his voice rough from age but still strong. "I've been the library's head astronomer for 30 years, and I never tire of this. The sun rises whether we understand it or not. The stars will overhead whether we can explain them or not. But we watch anyway. We measure. We calculate. We try to comprehend." He turns to look at the library below us, its halls now beginning to fill with the first light of day. "This building will not last forever," he continues. "Someday, perhaps not in my lifetime, but someday, it will fall. Fire or war or simple neglect, something will destroy it. All libraries are mortal." His words should be depressing, but somehow they're not. There's acceptance in his tone, even peace. "But the knowledge," he says, "the knowledge is different. We copy our scrolls and send them to other cities. Scholars come here, learn, and carry what they've learned to distant lands. The ideas we preserve, they're seeds. Some will germinate in places we'll never know, in times we cannot imagine." He gestures to the awakening city. Out there, right now, there are children who will become the next generation of thinkers. Some of them will walk through our doors for the first time today. They'll be overwhelmed, confused, perhaps frightened by how much there is to know. But some of them will catch fire. They'll dedicate their lives to understanding, to adding to what we've accumulated here. And when they do, the library will have succeeded, regardless of whether this building stands or falls. The sun is fully above the horizon now, its warmth beginning to dispel the night's chill. The old astronomer pulls his robe tighter and turns to go back inside. "The morning staff will arrive soon," he says. "You should see the main hall at dawn. It's something special." He descends the stairs, leaving us alone with the sunrise and the waking city. We take a final moment on the terrace, breathing the morning air, watching Alexandria transform from a city of shadows to a city of light and color. Smoke rises from thousands of cooking fires. Market vendors are setting up their stalls. Temple priests are beginning their dawn rituals, their chants carrying faintly on the wind. And below us, within the library itself, we can hear the first stirrings of the day shift. Doors opening, voices greeting each other, the sound of someone sweeping the entrance hall. The library is transitioning from its nocturnal self to its daylight persona, from contemplative silence to active scholarship. We return to the stairs and begin our descent, retracing our path through the levels we've explored. But everything looks different now. Light is beginning to stream through the high windows, revealing details we missed in the lamplight. The painted walls show their true colors. The marble gleams. The bronze fittings shine. The library is being reborn with the dawn, as it is every morning, has been every morning for generations. We descend through the scholars' quarters, past the map room where the bronze globe now catches the first rays of sunlight, gleaming as if lit from within. The restoration chamber is empty still, but someone has left a window open, and fresh air circulates through the space, carrying away the chemical smells of adhesives and replacing them with the clean scent of morning. Down the spiral staircase we go, our footsteps echoing differently now. The oppressive intimacy of night has lifted. The library feels larger somehow, more expansive, as if the darkness had compressed it and dawn is allowing it to breathe and stretch. We reach the main level and pause in the scribal hall. Here, the transformation is most dramatic. Sunlight pours through the eastern windows in great golden shafts, illuminating millions of dust motes that dance in the air like tiny stars. The empty desks wait patiently, their surfaces clean and ready for the day's work. As we watch, the first scribe arrives. He's young, perhaps 18, carrying a satchel of personal tools. He chooses a desk near the window, the best light, and begins to arrange his implements with the careful precision of ritual. This is how every working day begins for him, has begun for months or perhaps years, will continue to begin for as long as he serves the library. More scribes arrive, in ones and twos, greeting each other quietly, settling into their positions. There's a camaraderie here, the fellowship of shared labor. They compare notes about difficult passages they worked on yesterday, share techniques for achieving particularly clean letter forms, complain good-naturedly about authors whose handwriting is nearly illegible. The senior scribe arrives last, an older woman with ink-stained fingers and eyes that have spent decades focused on fine details. The others straighten slightly when she enters, not from fear but from respect. She moves through the room, checking yesterday's completed work that lies on her desk, making small marks where corrections are needed, nodding approval at particularly well-executed pages. "Good morning," she says, and the formal greeting signals the beginning of the workday. "We have requests for 3 new copies of Euclid, 2 of Herodotus, and a complete Iliad for a patron in Rhodes. The Iliad takes priority. The ship leaves in 4 days." The scribes nod and begin selecting their texts for copying. The room fills with the familiar sounds of work, scrolls being unrolled, ink being stirred, pens being tested on scrap papyrus. The library's great engine of preservation begins its daily operation. We leave them to their work and make our way back to the grand halls. The Hall of Greek Philosophy, which seemed so mysterious and solemn in lamplight, now blazes with color. The painted columns show their full glory, reds as deep as wine, blues as bright as the Mediterranean, gold that rivals the sun itself. The pigeonholes that held shadows now reveal their complete contents. We can see how meticulously organized everything is. Works by the same author grouped together. Multiple copies of important texts stored in different locations to protect against loss. Labels color-coded by subject matter, by age, by language. Scholars are beginning to arrive, and we recognize the rhythm of their entrance. They don't rush. They pause at the threshold, as if crossing from the mundane world into sacred space. Some touch the doorframe in a personal ritual. Others simply stand for a moment, taking in the sight of all this accumulated knowledge. A group of students enters, led by their tutor. They're young, eager, their eyes wide with wonder. The tutor is explaining something about the organization system, but the students are barely listening. They're too overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it all. One student, a girl of perhaps 14, breaks away from the group and approaches a particular set of scrolls. Her hand reaches out, then hesitates, not quite touching. The tutor notices and comes over. "You may look," he says gently. "That's what they're here for. But treat them with reverence. Some of these are older than your grandfather's grandfather." She carefully removes a scroll, unrolls it slightly, and gasps. "This is Sappho," she whispers. "The actual words of Sappho. A copy," the tutor corrects, "but yes, her words. Preserved here so that you, centuries after she lived, can read them and understand what she felt, what she knew about love and loss and beauty." The girl's eyes fill with tears. She's having a moment of connection across the centuries, feeling the presence of that ancient poet through the medium of carefully copied words. This is what the library does. It collapses time, makes conversation possible between the living and the long dead. The tutor gently helps her re-roll the scroll and return it to its place. "There will be time," he assures her. "You're young. You have years ahead to explore these treasures. Don't try to consume everything at once." More scholars arrive, and the hall fills with quiet industry. Someone sets up at a reading table with a stack of scrolls, clearly embarking on a research project that will take days or weeks. Another scholar converses in low tones with a librarian, trying to locate a specific text on hydraulic engineering. Near the windows, two elderly philosophers are engaged in animated discussion, their voices rising and falling as they debate some fine point of Platonic theory. Their hands move expressively, sketching diagrams in the air. Occasionally one will pause to consult a scroll, reading a passage aloud to support his argument. This is the library in its full daylight function, not a silent mausoleum of dead knowledge, but a living workshop where ideas are engaged, challenged, built upon. The scrolls are not museum pieces to be admired from a distance. They're tools, raw materials for the construction of new understanding. The morning light continues to strengthen, and we notice something we couldn't see in the lamplight. High up on the walls, just below the ceiling, there are windows we hadn't noticed. Clear-story windows that allow light to enter without taking up valuable wall space needed for scroll storage. The architects understood that knowledge needs illumination, both literal and metaphorical. We make our way to the Hall of Mathematics and Astronomy, curious to see it transformed by daylight. Here, too, the change is remarkable. The geometric diagrams carved into the stone walls seem to emerge from the surface, their shadows creating depth and dimension that makes the abstract concepts almost tangible. A scholar is working at one of the large tables, surrounded by scrolls and covered in chalk dust. He's working on a proof, we realize, attempting to extend Euclid's work into new territory. His wax tablet is filled with diagrams and calculations, crossed out and redrawn multiple times. His face shows intense concentration mixed with frustration. As we watch, he pauses, stares at his work, then suddenly laughs. A short, surprised bark of sound that makes other scholars look up. He's found it, whatever he was seeking. The breakthrough moment. He immediately begins writing furiously, capturing the insight before it fades. This is scholarship at its most intense. The moment when confusion crystallizes into clarity, when disparate pieces suddenly form a coherent whole. It's what draws people to this place, this possibility of discovery, of being the first to understand something that has eluded understanding before. We move toward the Hall of Natural Philosophy, where the morning sun is streaming through the tall windows we stood before at dawn. The owl we saw in the night is sleeping now, its head tucked under its wing, a small ball of feathers. The scholar who cares for the specimens is here, changing water in the cages, adding fresh food, making notes about the creature's behavior. The young sparrow from last night is moving around its cage, testing its injured wing with small, cautious movements. The scholar watches it closely, comparing its movements to a diagram in an open scroll. Aristotle says the wing should show improvement by the third day. She murmurs to herself. He's right, as usual. The question is why? What principle governs the healing of bone and sinew? The elephant skull looks different in daylight, less mysterious, more concrete. A group of medical students has gathered around it, and their instructor is pointing out features of the bone structure, discussing how form follows function, how the massive skull is actually surprisingly light, filled with air chambers that reduce weight without sacrificing strength. Nature is the greatest engineer, the instructor says. We can learn from her designs, apply her principles to human constructions. The library gives us the tools to study nature systematically, to build upon the observations of those who came before us. We leave the Hall of Natural Philosophy and return to the main entrance hall, the great space where our journey began in darkness so many hours ago. The transformation is complete now. What was a realm of shadows and lamplight is now flooded with brilliant morning sun streaming through the massive bronze doors, which stand wide open to welcome the day's visitors. The marble floor we walked across in near darkness now gleams like water, its veined patterns flowing in waves of amber and gold. Our footsteps no longer echo in emptiness. The hall is filling with people. Scholars in their robes, students clutching wax tablets, visiting dignitaries from distant cities, merchants who have donated scrolls in exchange for the prestige of being library patrons. The attendants who moved like ghosts through the night are still here, but they seem more solid now, more present. They're directing visitors, answering questions, maintaining order in the gentle chaos of the library's morning rush. Near the entrance, a new arrival stands frozen, overwhelmed. He's clearly traveled far. His robes are dusty, his sandals worn. Perhaps he's a scholar from Athens or Damascus or Rome, making his pilgrimage to this temple of knowledge. An attendant approaches him kindly. "First visit?" the attendant asks. The traveler can only nod, speechless. "It affects everyone that way," the attendant says with a smile. "Take your time. The library has waited centuries to share its treasures with you. It can wait a few moments more while you catch your breath." We watch as the traveler slowly regains his composure, his eyes adjusting to the scale of the space, his mind beginning to grasp the magnitude of what he's seeing. This is a moment of transformation. He entered as one person and will leave as another, changed by the simple fact of knowing that such a place exists, that human beings can create something so dedicated to the preservation and advancement of understanding. The morning light shifts as the sun climbs higher. The great entrance hall begins to feel less like a temple and more like a busy crossroads. Conversations overlap. Greek, Egyptian, Persian, Latin, Hebrew, languages we cannot identify. The library is truly cosmopolitan, drawing seekers of knowledge from every corner of the known world. A merchant is negotiating with a senior librarian about donating a collection of scrolls from India. The librarian examines them carefully, assessing their condition, their uniqueness, their value to the collection. "We have 3 of these already," she says, pointing to one scroll. "But these we do not have. They will be welcome additions." The merchant beams with pride. His name will be recorded in the library's registers as a donor, a small measure of immortality. Long after his ships have rotted and his wealth has been spent, his name will remain in the records, connected forever to the knowledge he helped preserve. We notice a commotion near one of the side halls. Not distress, but excitement. A group of scholars has gathered, speaking in animated tones. We move closer to hear. "Arrived this morning from Pergamum," one is saying. "A complete copy of the Lyceum's lecture notes. Aristotle's actual teaching notes, not the polished treatises." "Are they genuine?" another asks skeptically. The authenticators are examining them now, but the provenance seems solid. If they're real, this is extraordinary. His working thoughts, his discussions with students, material that was never meant for publication. The group moves off toward the authentication chamber, still discussing the implications. This is how the library grows, scroll by scroll, piece by piece, each edition carefully verified and cataloged before being integrated into the vast collection. We make our way to one of the reading halls we haven't yet visited, the Hall of History and Chronicles. Here, the walls are covered not just with pigeonholes, but with painted timelines, visual representations of the flow of human events from the legendary past to the present day. The timeline begins with myth, the founding of cities by gods and heroes, the Trojan War, the wanderings of Odysseus. As it progresses toward the present, myth gradually gives way to documented history. Kings whose reigns can be verified, battles whose dates are known, treaties whose texts survive. Scholars are gathered around tables covered with scrolls, cross-referencing different accounts of the same events. History, their learning, is not a simple narrative but a complex web of competing perspectives, contradictory reports, gaps in knowledge that must be honestly acknowledged. One scholar is comparing 3 different accounts of the Persian Wars, Herodotus, of course, but also Persian court records and Egyptian observations. They all saw the same events, he's explaining to his students, but from different vantage points with different concerns, different biases. Our task is not to choose which account is true, but to understand why each account takes the form it does. This is sophisticated thinking, historical methodology being born. The library enables this kind of comparative study. Only here can a scholar access Greek, Persian, and Egyptian sources simultaneously, can see the same events through multiple cultural lenses. Near the windows, we find something unexpected. A children's reading corner. Small benches, scrolls selected for younger readers, an attendant specially trained to work with children. A mother has brought her young son, perhaps 7 years old, and the attendant is showing him a scroll with large, clear letters and colorful illustrations. This is the story of Odysseus, the attendant says gently. See here? This is his ship, and these are the monsters he encountered. The boy's eyes are wide with wonder. He reaches out to touch the illustration, then pulls his hand back, uncertain if it's allowed. You may touch it carefully, the attendant assures him. This scroll was made especially for young readers. It's meant to be handled, to be loved. The boy gently traces the outline of Odysseus's ship with one small finger. His mother watches with tears in her eyes. Her son, a fisherman's child, is touching knowledge that was once reserved only for princes and priests. This is the library's most radical act, its accessibility. Not everyone can read, certainly. Not everyone has the education to engage with philosophical treatises or mathematical proofs. But the library's doors are open. Anyone can enter. Anyone can ask questions. Anyone can begin the journey toward understanding. We move on, making our way now toward the center of the library, where the great catalog hall lies. We visited it in darkness. Now we'll see it in full light. The hall is bustling with activity. The catalog scribes are at their stations, updating records as new acquisitions arrive, correcting entries when errors are discovered, cross-referencing related works. This is the nervous system of the library, the index that makes finding anything possible in the vast collection. A scholar approaches the main desk with a question. I'm looking for works on the properties of light, reflection, refraction, the behavior of shadows. The catalog librarian doesn't even need to consult the records. Euclid's optics, naturally. Also Ptolemy's work on astronomical refraction. You'll find relevant material there. And there's an untranslated Egyptian text on shadows and timekeeping that might interest you. Let me write down the locations. She produces a small piece of papyrus and quickly notes the information in a clear, efficient hand. The scholar thanks her and hurries off. Another inquiry comes immediately. Do we have anything on the cultivation of olives in regions with limited rainfall? The librarian thinks for a moment. There's a section in Theophrastus's botanical works. Also, we received some agricultural manuals from Spain last year that address dry farming techniques. And you might check the Persian agricultural texts. They have extensive experience with irrigation in arid climates. The catalog librarians are not just record keepers. They're guides, connectors, people who understand the collection well enough to see relationships between disparate works, to suggest unexpected sources that might illuminate a question. This is knowledge management at its finest. Not just storing information, but organizing it, indexing it, making it discoverable and useful. The catalogs transform the library from a mere warehouse into a tool for active inquiry. We stand in the center of this bustling hall, watching the intricate dance of questions and answers, of seekers and guides. The morning sun streams through high windows, illuminating dust motes that swirl in the air like thoughts made visible. Our night in the library is over. We have walked its silent halls in darkness, witnessed its transformation at dawn, and now seen it in full daylight operation. But somehow, it's the night journey we'll remember most. Those quiet hours when we had the library almost to ourselves, when we could hear the breathing of the place, when knowledge felt not like information to be acquired but like presence to be experienced. We make our way toward a section of the library we've not yet explored, the Hall of Poetry and Literature. Even before we enter, we can hear something unusual, a voice, reading aloud. In most halls, scholars work in silence or whispered consultation. But here, the spoken word is honored. The hall is arranged differently from the others. Yes, there are the familiar pigeonholes filled with scrolls, but there are also performance spaces, small amphitheaters carved into the architecture itself, with stone benches arranged in semicircles facing a central platform. In one of these spaces, a poet stands reading his own work to a small audience of perhaps 20 people. His voice rises and falls with practiced skill, bringing out the rhythm and music of his verses. The poem is about the sea, about sailors and storms and the capricious nature of fortune. His listeners are rapt, some nodding along to the meter, others closing their eyes to better hear the words. When he finishes, there's a moment of silence, that sacred pause that follows true art, and then quiet appreciation. No applause. That would be too crude for this setting. Instead, a gentle murmur of approval, of recognition that something worthwhile has been shared. An older scholar approaches the poet. The imagery in the third stanza, she says, it echoes Sappho's fragment about the storm at sea. Was that intentional? The poet's face lights up. Yes, you caught it. I didn't think anyone would notice. I've been studying the fragments we have of her work, trying to understand how she achieved such emotional density in so few words. They move off together, discussing technique, influence, the craft of poetry. This is what the library enables, not just the preservation of old works, but the creation of new ones, informed by deep knowledge of the tradition. We move through the hall, past shelves containing the works of Homer, multiple copies, different editions, commentaries and analyses filling entire sections. Here is the Iliad, the foundational text of Greek culture, preserved in dozens of versions. Scholars debate which readings are most authentic, which textual variants preserve the oldest traditions. Near the window, someone has laid out a comparative study, the same passage from the Iliad in 4 different copies, showing how small variations have crept in through successive copies. The scholar working on this is attempting to reconstruct what Homer actually wrote, to get as close as possible to the original words sung 3 or 4 centuries ago. It's painstaking work, requiring knowledge of archaic Greek, understanding of poetic meter, familiarity with oral performance traditions. But it matters. Words matter. The precise shade of meaning in a particular phrase can change how we understand not just a passage, but an entire worldview. We notice a section dedicated to drama, the plays of Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides. These scrolls contain not just the words but stage directions, notes about performance, even sketches of costume and set designs. Theater is not just literature. It's a complete art form, and the library preserves every aspect it can. A group of actors has been given permission to use one of the small performance spaces. They're rehearsing a tragedy, working through a particularly difficult scene. They stop frequently to consult the scroll, to debate how a line should be delivered, what emotion the playwright intended. When Antigone says this, one actor argues, is she defiant or resigned? The words could support either interpretation. They try it both ways, and the difference is striking. Same words, completely different meanings depending on tone and inflection. This is the challenge of dramatic literature. The text is only part of the equation. The rest must be discovered through performance, through embodiment. We leave the actors to their work and discover a quieter corner of the hall, where the love poetry is kept. Here are the works of Sappho, what survives of them. Fragments mostly, poems broken by time, their endings lost, their contexts uncertain. Yet what remains is so powerful, so immediate in its emotion, that the gaps almost don't matter. A young woman sits alone, reading one of these fragments. Her lips move silently, sounding out the ancient words. Tears run down her face. Whatever Sappho wrote 200 years ago about love and longing and loss, it still has the power to move, to make the heart ache with recognition. This is literature's magic, its ability to capture human experience so precisely that centuries become irrelevant. The young woman crying over Sappho's poetry could be Sappho herself, could be someone from a future we cannot imagine. The emotion transcends time. Nearby, the erotic poetry is stored, works by various authors exploring the full spectrum of human desire. The library does not censor or shy away from this aspect of human experience. Passion, physical love, the body's hungers. These two are part of what it means to be human, and therefore worthy of preservation and study. A philosophy student is comparing these erotic poems with Plato's Symposium, looking at how different traditions approach the nature of love and desire. Physical versus spiritual love. Temporary pleasure versus eternal beauty. The Greek intellectual tradition wrestles with these questions, and the library provides the materials for that wrestling. We move on, through sections devoted to comedy, to epic poetry from cultures beyond Greece, to the verses of Egyptian priests and Persian mystics. Every culture uses poetry to capture what prose cannot: the ineffable, the emotional, the experiences that exist beyond the reach of pure logic. In one corner, we find something unexpected: children's verses. Simple poems for teaching letters, for memorizing numbers, for learning moral lessons. Be kind to strangers, for the gods walk among us in disguise. The wise ant stores food in summer, knowing winter comes. These humble verses will shape minds for generations, will be the first poetry many children encounter. An elderly woman is copying one of these teaching poems, her hand shaking slightly but still forming clear letters. Perhaps she's a grandmother, creating a scroll for her grandchildren. Perhaps she's a teacher, preparing materials for her students. The library serves everyone, from the most sophisticated philosopher to the humblest educator. We're drawn toward another performance space where something different is happening. A scholar is demonstrating ancient music, playing a reconstructed lyre while reading epic poetry aloud. This is how Homer was meant to be experienced. Not read silently, but performed, sung, embodied. The scholar's voice is untrained but earnest. The lyre accompaniment is simple, just marking the rhythm, supporting the flow of words. But even in this modest performance, we can sense something of how the Iliad must have felt to its original audiences. Gathered around fires, listening to a bard weave tales of gods and heroes, feeling the words and music work together to create something larger than either alone. When he finishes the passage, he sets down the lyre and addresses his small audience. We study these texts as literature, he says, but we must remember they were performance. They were meant for the ear, not the eye. Reading them silently is like looking at a musical score and calling it music. We must hear them, feel them in our bodies, understand them as sound and rhythm. It's a reminder that the library, for all its written treasures, preserves arts that resist pure textual preservation. Music, theater, oral poetry. These require active interpretation, ongoing tradition, living practitioners who keep the forms alive. We leave the hall of poetry and make our way toward one final destination, the Chamber of Correspondence. This is where the library maintains contact with the wider world of learning, where letters arrive from scholars across the known world, where the librarians coordinate the acquisition of new texts and the sharing of knowledge with other institutions. The chamber is smaller than the great halls, more intimate and businesslike. Desks are arranged around the perimeter, each one staffed by a scribe responsible for correspondence with a particular region. There's a desk for Greek cities, another for Egyptian contacts, one for Persian and Eastern connections, even one for the growing intellectual centers in the Western Mediterranean, Syracuse, Carthage, the emerging power of Rome. At the central desk sits the correspondence coordinator, a woman of middle years with the harried expression of someone managing too many moving pieces. As we watch, a messenger arrives with a leather satchel of letters. She sorts through them quickly, distributing them to the appropriate desks. 3 requests for copies from Athens, all wanting Euclid, she mutters. 2 inquiries from Damascus about astronomical observations. A letter from Rome asking about architectural treatises. And, oh, this is interesting, a scholar in India claiming to have developed a new number system that includes a symbol for nothing. She sets aside the Indian letter for special attention. That will need to go to the mathematics section. If it's legitimate, it could be significant. The correspondence chamber hums with quiet efficiency. At the Greek desk, a scribe is composing a response to a library in Rhodes. His letter is formal but warm, discussing the terms under which Alexandria might loan copies of certain texts, the protocols for ensuring their safe return, the mutual benefits of scholarly exchange. Knowledge hoarded is knowledge lost, he writes. We preserve not for ourselves alone, but for all who seek understanding. The library at Rhodes honors learning as we do. Therefore, we gladly share what we have accumulated. It's a reminder that Alexandria, despite being the greatest library in the world, does not see itself as the sole repository of knowledge. It's a hub in a network, a bright star in a constellation of learning institutions scattered across the civilized world. At the Persian desk, a different kind of correspondence is taking place. The scribe here is fluent in multiple languages, translating requests and responses between Persian, Greek, and Aramaic. A scholar in Ctesiphon has sent detailed astronomical observations, asking if they align with Alexandria's records. The scribe is preparing to forward these to the observatory, along with a letter of thanks and encouragement. Your observations of the lunar eclipse accord precisely with our own, she writes. This confirms our calculations and strengthens our confidence in the predictive models. We eagerly await your notes on the upcoming transit of Venus. Science, we realize, is inherently collaborative. No single observer, no single institution can capture the full complexity of natural phenomena. The library serves not just as a repository but as a clearinghouse, collecting observations from across the world, identifying patterns that would be invisible to any single observer. The Egyptian desk handles a different kind of correspondence, communications with temples and priestly schools throughout Egypt. The relationship here is more delicate. Many temples have ancient archives of their own, knowledge passed down through generations of priests. The library wants access to these texts, but must negotiate carefully, respecting religious sensitivities and traditional privileges. The scribe here is clearly Egyptian himself, likely trained in a temple before coming to the library. He understands both worlds, can speak the language of priestly tradition while advocating for broader scholarly access. The wisdom preserved in your temple honors the gods and serves the people, he writes to a high priest in Thebes. We seek not to replace or diminish your sacred trust, but to ensure that this wisdom endures beyond any single temple's lifetime. A copy in our archive safeguards against fire, flood, or the uncertainties of political change. It's a persuasive argument, acknowledging tradition while making a case for redundancy, for distributed preservation. At the Western desk, the correspondence has a different flavor, more exploratory, more tentative. The intellectual traditions of Carthage, Syracuse, and Rome are younger, less established than those of Greece and the East. But the library is interested in their developments, particularly in practical arts like engineering and agriculture. Your description of the aqueduct construction in Rome interests us greatly, the scribe writes. We would welcome any technical drawings or calculations your engineers might share. In exchange, we can offer access to our collection of hydraulic works, including Egyptian irrigation techniques developed over millennia. This is knowledge brokering, identifying what each party has that the other needs, facilitating exchanges that benefit both. The library's vast collection gives it something to offer everyone, making it an attractive partner for institutions that might otherwise be reluctant to share their specialized knowledge. A young apprentice approaches the correspondence coordinator with a question. This letter from a scholar in Britannia, he says uncertainly. He claims to have observed stones that fall from the sky. Should we respond? It seems unlikely. The coordinator takes the letter, reads it carefully. Unlikely, yes, but not impossible. We don't know everything. Respond politely, ask for more details, request samples if possible. Strange claims sometimes turn out to be true. The library should be skeptical, but not dismissive. It's a glimpse into the library's intellectual openness, its willingness to consider claims that challenge conventional understanding. Not everything will prove true, but automatic rejection risks missing genuine discoveries. We notice a wall covered with maps showing the library's network of correspondence. Pins mark cities and institutions across the known world, a dense cluster around the Mediterranean, then spreading thinner toward the edges. Britannia, India, the kingdoms of Inner Africa, distant Scythia. Each pin represents a connection, a conversation, a potential source of new knowledge. The library's reach is astonishing. From this single building in Alexandria, threads extend to scholars and institutions thousands of miles away, creating a web of exchange that spans cultures and languages. On another wall, there's a different kind of map, a temporal one, showing the flow of knowledge through time. It traces how certain ideas migrated from Babylon to Greece, from Egypt to Persia, from India westward through trade routes. Knowledge, the map suggests, has no permanent home. It travels, transforms, cross-pollinates. A senior librarian enters the chamber, and the correspondence coordinator rises respectfully. They confer in low voices about something urgent. We catch only fragments. Ship wrecked off Cyprus, carrying scrolls from. Can we send a recovery team? Water damage might be severe. The loss of texts is an ever-present anxiety. Ships sink. Caravans are raided. Fires break out. Every day, somewhere in the world, irreplaceable knowledge disappears. The library fights against this entropy, but it's a battle that can never be fully won. The senior librarian departs, and normal operations resume. Letters are written, translated, sealed with wax and the library's official stamp. Messengers arrive and depart. The global conversation continues. We move toward the chamber's exit, but pause at a desk where something unusual is happening. A scribe is composing a letter not to another institution, but to an individual, a scholar who wrote to the library years ago, asking questions that the librarians couldn't answer at the time. Your inquiry about the geometry of curved surfaces, the scribe writes, remained unanswered for 3 years. But we have recently acquired texts from Alexandria's own Apollonius that address precisely this question. If you are still interested, we can now provide the information you sought. 3 years. The library remembers. It doesn't let questions die just because answers aren't immediately available. It waits, accumulates knowledge, and eventually, sometimes, can respond to inquiries that seemed hopeless when first received. This long memory, this institutional patience, is part of what makes the library extraordinary. Individual scholars live and die. Their questions and obsessions might seem quirky or marginal. But the library preserves even these, holds space for them, sometimes for decades, until the right text arrives, the right connection is made. We leave the correspondence chamber and find ourselves back in the main entrance hall. The morning is well advanced now, the sun high in the sky, the library at peak activity. Hundreds of people move through the space, each on their own quest for knowledge, their own journey of understanding. We've walked these halls for an entire night and into the day. We've seen the library in darkness and in light, in silence and in activity. We've witnessed preservation and discovery, ancient wisdom and new ideas, the work of famous scholars and anonymous scribes. But more than anything, we've felt the library's essential nature, not as a building or a collection, but as an aspiration, a commitment to the belief that human knowledge matters, that it should be preserved, shared, built upon across generations. Near the entrance, we noticed the traveler we saw earlier, the one who was so overwhelmed when he first arrived. He's standing now before a pigeonhole, a scroll carefully unrolled in his hands, completely absorbed. The overwhelm has transformed into engagement. He's no longer paralyzed by the magnitude of the collection. He's diving in, beginning his own journey of discovery. An attendant passes us, the same elderly man we encountered during the night. In daylight, he looks more tired, the lines on his face deeper. He's been awake for perhaps 24 hours, tending the lamps, guiding visitors, maintaining the silent watch that keeps the library functioning. He notices our attention and offers a weary smile. "End of shift soon," he says. "I'll sleep through the afternoon, then return tonight." The library never sleeps, so we take turns keeping vigil. It's an honor, really. Every night I work here, I think about the scholars who will come tomorrow, the discoveries they might make because we kept the lamps burning, because we kept everything safe and organized. He pauses, looking around the vast entrance hall with obvious affection. "This place will outlive us all," he says softly. "Long after we're dust, people will walk these halls, touch these scrolls, learn from the accumulated wisdom of ages. That's what keeps me coming back, night after night. I'm part of something larger than myself, larger than any individual life." He touches his hand to his heart in a gesture of farewell and moves off toward the staff quarters, toward well-earned rest. We stand alone now in the flowing crowd, invisible observers in a stream of seekers. Our journey through the library is complete, but the library itself will continue, as long as humans value knowledge, as long as curiosity burns in the human heart. We make our way slowly toward the great bronze doors, but we're not quite ready to leave. There's something magnetic about this place, a gravitational pull that makes departure difficult. We pause near the entrance, turning back for one final look at the vast hall stretching behind us. The light has changed again. The morning sun, which earlier streamed horizontally through the eastern windows, now falls more vertically, creating different patterns of illumination. The library transforms with every hour, revealing new aspects of itself as the sun traces its eternal arc across the sky. A group of children passes us, perhaps 10 or 12 of them, led by a patient teacher. They're from the city's public school, brought here on an educational visit. Most are the children of merchants, craftsmen, even laborers, not the elite, but ordinary Alexandrians whose parents believe education is worth pursuing. The teacher gathers them in a circle near the entrance. "Before we explore," she says, "I want you to understand what this place means. Every scroll you see represents someone's life work, years of observation, thinking, writing. Some represent the work of many people across many generations. This library is humanity's memory, our collective understanding of the world." One child raises her hand. "But teacher, what if the library burns down? What if all this knowledge is lost?" It's an innocent question, but it strikes at something fundamental. The teacher's expression becomes serious. "That's why we make copies," she says. "Why we share knowledge with other libraries, other cities. Why we teach you to read and write and think. Knowledge doesn't live in buildings or scrolls, it lives in minds. As long as people remember, as long as they teach the next generation, knowledge survives." She pauses, looking around the hall. "But you're right to worry. Libraries are fragile. All human creations are fragile. That's why we must care for them, protect them, value them. And why each of you, when you learn something here, carries a responsibility to preserve it, to pass it on." The children nod solemnly, perhaps not fully understanding but sensing the weight of what they're being told. The teacher leads them deeper into the library, their voices fading as they go. We're left contemplating her words. The library is fragile. This thought, which we could push away during our night journey, becomes unavoidable in the full light of day. These scrolls are papyrus and ink. This building is stone and wood and bronze. All of it can burn, can crumble, can be destroyed. And yet, standing here in this moment, with hundreds of scholars engaged in their work, with scribes copying texts that will be sent to distant cities, with children beginning their educational journeys. The library feels eternal. It feels like something that will always exist, that must always exist because the alternative is unthinkable. We notice an older scholar, perhaps 70 years old, his beard completely white, sitting on a bench near the entrance. He's not reading or writing, just sitting, watching the flow of people with a gentle smile. His eyes have the slightly unfocused look of someone whose vision has faded with age. On impulse, we approach him. He seems to sense our presence and turns toward us, though we wonder how much he can actually see. "First visit?" he asks, as if he can somehow tell. We consider the question. In a sense, every visit to the library is a first visit. It's impossible to see everything, to know everything, to exhaust its possibilities. "I've been coming here for 50 years. He continues, not waiting for our answer. "I started as a student, barely older than those children who just passed. I stayed to become a scholar, then a teacher, then... Well, now I'm just an old man who can't quite bear to leave." He gestures vaguely toward the interior of the library. "My eyes are nearly gone now. I can't read the scrolls anymore, can't do my own research. But I still come every day. I listen to the sound of this place. The whisper of papyrus being unrolled, the scratch of pens, the footsteps, the conversations. It's the sound of thinking, of learning, of human minds stretching toward understanding." He's quiet for a moment, then continues. "I've seen 3 head librarians in my time here. I've watched the collection grow from perhaps 400,000 scrolls to well over 500,000. I've seen scholars make discoveries that changed how we understand the world. And I've seen scrolls turn to dust despite our best efforts to preserve them." His smile fades slightly. "Everything ends, eventually. Even this. Someday, maybe not in our lifetime, maybe not for centuries, but someday this library will fall. The scrolls will scatter or burn or simply crumble with age. And people will mourn, will say, 'If only we had saved it. If only we had tried harder.'" He shakes his head. "But that misses the point. The library's purpose isn't to last forever. It's to be a light while it can, to preserve and share knowledge for as long as possible, to inspire people to value learning. If it does that, even for just a few centuries, it will have succeeded." His words carry the weight of long experience, of someone who has spent a lifetime in intimate relationship with this institution and understands both its glory and its limitations. "I won't see the end," he says. "I'll be dead long before that day comes. But I've made my peace with it. I spent my life here, contributed what I could. The scrolls I helped preserve, the students I taught. Some of that will survive, will ripple forward into the future. That's enough. That has to be enough." He rises slowly, using the bench for support. "Enjoy your visit," he says. "Pay attention. Remember what you see and feel here. Knowledge is preserved in minds as much as in scrolls. You'll carry something of this place with you when you leave." And with that, he shuffles off into the library's interior, one more scholar among hundreds, seeking whatever it is he seeks in the time he has left. We're alone again, standing at the threshold between the library and the world outside. Through the bronze doors, we can see Alexandria going about its business. Carts rumbling past, merchants calling their wares, the endless bustle of urban life. But inside the library, there's a different kind of energy. Quieter, more focused, but no less vital. This is where the city, and by extension, the civilization, thinks about itself, questions itself, tries to understand the universe it inhabits. We take one final walk around the entrance hall, absorbing details we might have missed. The way light falls on the marble, creating pools of brightness and shadow. The smell of papyrus and ink, so familiar now that we notice it only when we consciously attend to it. The sound of hundreds of people engaged in quiet study, a low murmur like distant waves. We pass the hall of Greek philosophy and glimpse scholars still debating, still arguing about questions Plato and Aristotle wrestled with centuries ago. We pass the scribal hall and see the copyists bent over their work, preserving today what will be ancient tomorrow. We pass the hall of natural philosophy and hear the sound of the owl, awake again as evening approaches, calling out in the gathering dusk. The library is preparing for another night. The day scholars are beginning to depart, gathering their notes, carefully re-rolling the scrolls they've been consulting. The evening scholars are arriving, those who prefer to work in the quieter hours after the crowds have thinned. The attendants are beginning their rounds, checking that scrolls have been returned to their proper places, trimming lamp wicks, preparing for the shift from daylight to lamplight once again. The cycle continues as it has for generations, as it will, for a time, continue to do. We step finally through the bronze doors and into the late afternoon air. Behind us, the library stands solid and permanent seeming, its limestone walls glowing golden in the slanting light. But we carry with us now the knowledge of its fragility, the understanding that all this, the scrolls, the building, the institution itself, exists only because people choose to value it, to protect it, to dedicate their lives to its continuation. The library is not immortal, but for now, in this moment, it stands, preserves, teaches, it inspires, and as long as it does these things, it fulfills its purpose. We walk away, down the limestone steps worn smooth by countless feet, into the city, into our own lives. But something has changed. We've spent a night and a day in the presence of humanity's accumulated wisdom, and we cannot return to unknowing. The library has given us a gift, not just the information it contains, but the example it sets. The belief that knowledge matters, that understanding is worth pursuing, that we owe something to the future, just as we've inherited something from the past. And perhaps that's the greatest treasure in all those halls, not any particular scroll or discovery, but the simple, powerful idea that learning is sacred, that knowledge should be preserved and shared, that each generation has a responsibility to leave the world more understood than they found it. The camera pulls back slowly, showing the library in its architectural glory, the harbor beyond, the lighthouse beginning to glow as evening approaches. The city of Alexandria spreads out in all directions, a testament to human ambition and achievement. But the library stands apart, unique, a place where time slows down, where the dead speak to the living, where questions asked centuries ago still echo, waiting for answers. The screen fades slowly to black, and in the silence that follows, we hear one final sound. The whisper of papyrus being unrolled, a scroll being opened, knowledge waiting to be discovered. And then nothing but quiet,